This is Leafs Morning Take with Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill.
Now we've got a fight started here right off the bat with Rosehill.
30 minutes of live, nonstop Leafs talk starts now.
As we enter this Friday show, still nothing to report in Leafs Nation. The wait continues leading up to Wednesday and Thursday's draft from Music City, presented by Botano. It's the Friday edition of Leafs Morning Take. Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill. What's up, Rosie? How are you, buddy?
What is up? I am good, man. Waiting for things to happen. I don't think much is going to happen until at least the draft.
Any big plans for the weekend?
I got to work on Saturday and Sunday. Going to play a little golf. So, yeah, you could say there's big plans.
Massive golf guy. It's completely draft season for me. That's the one thing I'm looking forward to is the draft. Last night I checked out a bit of the NBA draft. Did you see the guy the Raptors drafted in the first round?
No, is he just a big mutant or what?
I thought I was being punked. So this guy, 13th overall, his name is Grady Dick. But look at the outfit on Grady Dick, man.
Grady Dick with a bit of steez on him. Good Lord. Yeah, good for him, man. I like it. You got to fit in there with that league. They like to shine up and wear some funky outfits. So he looks like he's at like the Grammys or something instead of the draft, doesn't it?
Yeah, but dude, it was more the name that got me. Like maybe it's
Grady
being
Dick.
A 14-year-old kid, but like the last name Dick and the first name Grady, and you're being drafted in the NBA. But apparently he's a phenomenal shooter.
Where's he from?
Pardon me?
Where's he from?
I think Kansas. I think he went to Kansas because everybody my mentions right away are like, this guy's wicked. This guy's wicked. I was like, I have no clue who he is.
Sweet. Yeah, someone to watch, eh? Is he going to be ready to go? Or yeah, I guess NBA draft, is it like NFL? Do you go right there? I guess you got to finish school, or what's the deal?
It depends. Like every player is different. I think obviously Victor Wembanyama is ready. The first overall pick yesterday. The dude's an absolute freak. He's 7'5", but like, that is the intrigue this time of year, specifically in the NHL. Like, which first rounders are actually going to play in the NHL next year? That's always the question. You can't forget a couple years down the road, they missed an entire season, a lot of them due to COVID and all that stuff. So from that perspective, we all know Connor Bedard's going to be in this league. Adam Fantilli, Leo Carlson, and the others, Will Smith. I mean, will they be in the league right away? I just think it's a tough jump. And obviously you can speak to it having done it, right?
Yeah, it depends what you're playing. I think it's a tougher jump going from major junior to the NHL than NCAA in some ways, mostly that you can be playing with like 24-year-old men where, majority is like 19, 20-year-olds, the oldest in junior. But it seems like the best, wow, that's averaging out. I mean, when I was coming up, the NCAA was starting to, guys were starting, like legit first rounders were starting to go NCAA and tier 2 junior. And it just depends what type of player you are. I think it used to be more physical in major junior for sure than NCAA. I think that's all of hockey is going less physical now, and they're not banging and crashing and being mean like they used to. So I don't know how big of a jump it was. That's interesting though. I'd like to talk to a couple of guys like maybe Nyzy and then a major junior guy and say, what is the bigger jump from major junior to the show or from NCAA to the show? I imagine they're fairly comparable.
We should have a summer summit on Leafs Morning Take where you have Matthew Nyes and say like a Nick Robertson, put them together on the show and break down the pros and cons of different levels of hockey.
Have them argue it out. There's always that argument. People are always surprised I was NCAA, but my rights were in Seattle and I live up in Olds, and I was just terrified to go down and finish high school in Seattle and everything. I was like, fuck that. I was staying home, and I was developing late and wanted to go tier 2. Take the NCAA, give yourself more time to sign and to make it, because I saw so many guys go to the glitz and glamour of the WHL, and 2 years later they're working a regular job because it's just a bit of a meat market for a lot of guys. So I wanted to give myself time, and didn't last too long in NCAA, but different strokes for different folks, man. There's lots of ways to get there. Yeah,
for those unaware, what are the pros and cons, whether it be junior hockey or going like the college route?
I personally think if you're a stud, if you're like a big time stud who's just going to run the show, then go major junior.
Yeah.
But if you're a late developer maybe, or you want to give yourself time, I mean, if you get drafted, I believe if you go to the major junior, you have 2 years to sign with that team, or you go back into the draft where no one goes, not usually do you go higher after getting put back in the draft. So NCAA, you can get drafted, finish your tier 2, go to NCAA for 4 years or leave early. And I mean, that NCAA is you're not riding the bus from Brandon to Portland to, you're working on your craft, you're working on your skills, you're in the gym, you're learning how to be a pro, and you're practicing constantly in NCAA, and you're playing those games on the weekend. So there's a lot of time, a lot of room for development. So if you want to develop and take your time to really try to be as good as you possibly can, then I think NCAA is a good route. But if you're just a stud ready to rock, then I think you'd probably go the major junior route, go light it up there, and step right into the pro ranks. But it's a little bit riskier in my mind.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of kids are torn with that decision, especially at a young age, and that's where your family comes in and your support system, right? I had a couple buddies growing up that they're really, really torn on the decision. And ultimately, I wonder if they made the right decision in the long run, where it's so appetizing and appealing to say, hey, let's go to the O show. Everybody's going to love us. Where maybe you take a step back, you go the college route. Maybe it takes a bit longer to get to your destination, but who knows if you even get to that spot. So I think it's really, really intriguing for that level as we get closer and closer to the NHL draft coming up on Wednesday. Remember to subscribe, tap that like button, leave us a review wherever you're checking us out at the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube. If you're watching right now and are not subscribed, at the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube, where you could subscribe. And again, hammer that like button. Additionally, we're available wherever you find your podcast. Just search Leafs Morning Take, will pop up. Don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com for the very latest on all things Toronto Maple Leafs. Thoughts, comments, questions, or concerns, drop us a line in the chat down below here on YouTube. We'll get to them a bit later on in the show. But for now, let's get over the boards. This yesterday, but not one, not two, not three, but just for good measure, a fourth bomb by Frank Saravalli regarding the Calgary Flames. It was a tough Thursday for that fan base. Noah Hannafin, Elias Lindholm, Tyler Toffoli, Michael Backlund. Saravalli pretty much intimating that all four of those guys are not interested in re-signing with that team following next season when they'll become UFAs next summer, man. That is some tough news, but ultimately, you like to link it to Toronto and who was the former GM of the Calgary Flames, Brad TRELIVING.
Yeah, you'd think there'd be some opportunity to scoop up, I don't know, if you want to, some of those guys. But, talk about a team being put in a position lately. Oof. I mean, they just did their rebuild, and they were on fire 2 years ago, and then just get dismantled from the point of Johnny Gaudreau and to Chuck leaving. TRELIVING did a fantastic job at getting some kind of value for those guys just bailing. You bring in a couple guys, Uyghur and Huberdeau, and get Kadri re-signed, and they just didn't get it done this year. I mean, Huberdeau was embarrassingly bad. I mean, the people up in Calgary, my group chat is all my buddies are Flames fans, right? Okay. So I get the second hand smoke from all those guys, and they're just disgusted in Huberdeau. Like, who is this guy? We give up a Tkachuk for this guy who just mails it in, has one of the biggest setbacks after a big year in NHL history, and not a big fan of Kadri, some of them guys either, just the way he's kind of seems like he mails it in. And now you got 3-4 other guys who are like, yeah, we're gone too. And makes you wonder, like, what is with this generation where, like, okay, it's cold up in Calgary for most of the hockey season. They're building a new rink, but it's not there yet. Their locker room and their amenities are not NHL quality, and they're working on that. So I guess that's kind of the thing. But can you think of the past where an organization just has like 5 core guys just like, I'm leaving? Like, usually it's like, do we have a chance to win? Who's coaching? What's the team looking like? How close are they to winning? And what's the contract situation? That's the only thing that matters. And now it's like, well, I like the sunshine. I want to wear my flip-flops to school or to the rink. So it's weird, man. It's kind of unprecedented. And the Calgary Flames fans are pulling their hair out going, what the hell is going on? But again, to bring it into Maple Leafs terms, I mean, I don't know. None of those guys have much grit. None of them have too much sand in their game, to be honest. Hannafin would be maybe a solid defenseman is what we're looking at here. He's 38 points, 26 years old, Boston kid. I would just love it if like a gritty defenseman came up, or like a really gritty like third liner came up who just loves to work. And none of the people in Calgary are too happy with these guys. They seem pretty soft, and we'll see where they end up. But I imagine, a guy like Brad TRELIVING has got all the ins and outs of all these guys, and he knows very well if he wants them or not and what value.
I think it's all perception. Like, let's not lose sight of the fact that a year ago, Calgary was the prototypical playoff team. They were going to win the Stanley Cup. They got Huberdeau, they got Nazem Kadri. So I think there's a bit of a recency bias with that. I wouldn't call these guys soft. Like, I watch a lot of Calgary Flames games. I do think some of these guys could help the Leafs out. Like, a Tyler Toffoli is such a clutch player, man. And I think that's honestly what's been missing from this team. We've talked about a lot the last couple of weeks how they can't score when it matters most. Well, you look at the pedigree of Tyler Toffoli. He scored some big-time goals in his career, won cups. Like, he's done it all. Like, that's the guy I would look at. Honestly, I could make sense of all four of these guys and being linked to the Toronto Maple Leafs. You need center help. Of course, if you're thinking John Tavares is better suited for the wing, that's where Backlund fits in. You know, that's where an Elias Lindholm fits in. Obviously, it would have to be big-time move, to trade for an Elias Lindholm, considering the dollar value being thrown around for potential extension with that guy. But Noah Hanifin is the guy I would zone in on. Like, he is a upgrade to anything this team has in the back end, maybe aside from Morgan Riley. But I do think there's some untapped potential with a guy like Noah Hanifin. But by far, he would bolster that top four, and I think he would add a different look to that blue line.
Yeah, he could. And if we're gonna, I think up front is where we need the grit and where we need the intensity and the workhorse. And I wasn't putting Toffoli into that group. I was looking at those three guys. If Toffoli becomes available and you can make a deal, he'd be my number one out of all those guys. I like that guy. He is a workhorse. He just plays with intensity. He's gritty. I'm not saying he fights guys and hits guys and starts shit, but he just will go through the hard areas. He'll cut to that middle of the ice and battle and have a guy hanging off him and keep his feet moving and second effort and bury that thing. And then huge celly. Like, he's an intense player. He doesn't sit on the perimeter and say, ooh, you take the puck. That wasn't close enough for me to get. And I just want this one-timer right in my sweet spot. Like, fuck that, man. That doesn't get it done. And we got too many of those guys. I want a gritty guy who will just not try to draw a penalty, who will just work his absolute bag off trying to get to that puck or get through to that sweet spot. If they call a penalty on him, fine, but he's certainly not trying to draw him. He's just working his ass off, playing with intensity, and I like Toffoli a lot. Make that move. And then Hanifin on the back end, would be nice too. It just matters, what do you got to do to get those guys, right? That's going to be the big question if they can get a deal done. And if they don't get a deal done and say, well, why didn't we get these guys? It's because they couldn't make a deal that made sense. They had to give up too much to give them, and it wouldn't be worth it.
Yeah, I would just add that it doesn't hurt the familiarity and the relationship that Brad Treliving, he knows that organization like the back of his hand. And that's a fortunate thing, right?
Yeah, there's no risk in getting a guy. When you get a guy and you don't really know much about him, I mean, their GM's going to be talking like he's friggin' Sidney Crosby, always leadership quality, they love him in the room, blah, blah, blah. If you don't know that guy, you're taking a chance. But, he would know these guys inside and out, and he would know their background, their families, their personality, what happens when they face adversity, all those little intangibles. He would know like the back of his hand. So that's definitely a positive for the Leafs Nation for sure.
Here's a good question from the chat from Luke. Where would you rather play, Mullet Arena for a season or Saddledome for a season?
The Dome. I wouldn't mind golfing a little bit in Mulsey, but I would be embarrassed. Like, you only get so many years. I don't care who you are. You only get so many years in the show. And when you walk into a bloody place where the NCAA team is basically dominating you, and you're just like, where's our locker room over here by the curtains? Like, fucking embarrassing, man. I'd be like, I can't believe I'm in the show right now and I'm dealing with this. Like, this isn't what I got to the show for. Mind you, the Saddledome ain't that pretty, but the Dome is rocking. The fans are wicked. And if that team, it's just sad because it looked like they were right there on the cusp of being great. And, Markstrom has a hiccup of a year. The guys they bring in don't do anything, and everyone wants to bail. It's a sad day for the Flames Nation, but maybe we can scoop up some of their scraps and turn them into something.
I like that. I like that look quite a bit. And for frequent listeners and viewers of this show, the one thing that sets off Jay Rosehill is the Arizona Coyotes. So that was a great question by Luke. The best, I think, question we've gotten all season in the YouTube chat. So appreciate that. We'll get to them, more of those later on. I want to touch on the salary cap as well. So the figure coming out yesterday, it's going to be $83.5 million, up $1 million from this past season. That's still not great news for the Leafs, like especially for cap strap teams like Toronto, where I think you can use every penny. I'm not crazy about that. So we're waiting for the big jump, right? Like, there's some guesstimation that it could be over $90 million in the next couple of years. And that's when I think the Leafs can benefit from this thing.
Yeah, it's not a big number that it went up, right? I mean, it's nice when, you're up at the you're up at the cap by like 25 cents like they have been before, but $1 million extra, sure, you'll take it. It's better than it not moving at all. But it'd be nice if it gets bumped by $3-4 million, and then all of a sudden we're talking, we can actually get the guy we want, and XYZ. There's just room to play, right? And there is for everybody. And you gotta understand that it's the same for everybody. So it's just kind of like that inflation where it just goes up for everybody, and everything kind of rises and becomes even again. But you've got the guys that you want that say, this guy needs an extra $1 million. A Luke Shen needs an extra $600,000-$700,000. Like, to find that in there is nice. But again, $1 million goes quick when you're talking about, these 20 some odd man rosters that everyone needs to get paid. And if the team's doing well and you're ready to win, you got to get everyone signed up. And if it's not a big salary cap increase, it's not a whole lot to play with. So we'll see what happens. But, I imagine the cap cruncher guys are saying, we're going to have some work to do here.
Had you wore your mask for those 2 years, man, we would have been out of it quicker. Honestly.
You living out east there, you probably believe that, eh?
Buddy, I was wearing 7 fucking masks, man. I'm like, give me another mask. I'm not leaving my condo, man. And I still got it.
Oh, I believe it. You were that guy walking down the sidewalk in the park with his mask on.
Dude, I don't know. No judgment. I still see people with masks, and this is not going to get political, but like, it was such a unique time to work and cover the NHL during the world pandemic. For those of you unaware, I was a Leafs radio host smack dab in the middle of the pandemic. I remember signing off alongside Gord Stellick at Scotiabank Arena. They had beat Tampa 2-1 in OT. I'm like, we'll talk on Thursday as they host the Nashville Predators. Well, that day never came, Rosie. And after that, I never went back to that building to be the radio host of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Everything was done via my condo or the Sportsnet studios. Just a crazy time. Like in 60 years, I'll think back and be like, my goodness, what in the hell was that in my life?
It was wild, man. Seeing that whole season played with no fans and just seeing how they were trying to get it done. And I mean, doing interviews from 10 feet away and XYZ. It was wild. The funniest thing, we were talking about that on the golf course the other day, because like there was no rakes in the bunkers. It
was ridiculous.
Someone sick and stuff. We were like, what is the silliest stuff you saw? And then I remember my brother was paying for a round of golf, and he paid with cash, and the lady was giving him his change, and she put it in an envelope and sealed it and said, don't open this for 4 days. We started dying laughing. So there's some silly times, man, but good thing we got out of it, and we're back to normal. And I really think about the players there living in that bubble.
Yeah.
Like, I heard some stories that it was like prison, where you can't leave your room, you can't see your friend, your food gets delivered to your door, and you go outside and walk around the courtyard for an hour for your exercise. Like, that's prison. And these are NHLers trying to perform and keep mentally sane and be able to go through that season. Your family's not with you. Like, that was a rough year, and those guys battled through it hard. I don't think they get enough credit for that, because it sounded like it was bloody brutal.
Who was it in the NBA bubble? An NBA player left to go to a strip club, but he claimed that he was getting takeout. He liked the food there. It was like it was the funniest thing ever, man. I forget what player. It wasn't James Harden. He's like notorious for going to strip clubs. I don't think it was James Harden. It was like a prolific NBA name. And maybe if you can remember in the chat, let us know. But he got caught leaving the bubble to go to a rip joint to pick up food, he claimed, and got busted big time.
Oh, they had good chili there, apparently.
But yeah, interesting times. And my lasting memory will be Toronto being up 3-1 against the Montreal Canadiens and losing that series. Dude, I've never been hotter under my collar covering the Maple Leafs like I was after they lost Game 7. I lost my shit to the point where I got death threats. I was doing a post-game show, man. I took phone calls and people were on me saying I was too hard on the players and there's a world pandemic. And I'm like, dude, these guys choked away a game to a team that shouldn't have been in the Stanley Cup playoffs. They're a rival, and they somehow lost. And then there was that whole Alex Galchenyuk pass that set up the 2-on-1 in Game 5, I think it was, to start the comeback. Like, it was crazy to me. I've never been hotter covering the Leafs, man.
I can tell the scar tissue is still fresh. I think that's where your jadedness came from that year. But I remember them going into that saying, oh, good, they get to play the Habs, walk all over them, wipe the floor with them, and embarrass them, hopefully. I mean, it was a mismatch. And obviously all the players on the Leafs thought the same thing. And those guys were, taking their opportunity, saying, holy smokes, we're right in this thing. We just snuck in and we're going to go guns blazing. And that happens more often than you'd think at, the mismatched teams. I mean, look at Boston and Florida this year. Boston's just all they thought about was raising the Stanley Cup since
Yeah.
Christmas. Like, we're going to win this cup. We're the best team ever. And maybe we'll take it seriously in the conference finals and the finals, blah, blah. All of a sudden they're standing there shocked because they got ran through by a team who's, I mean, that's how close the NHL is. And I remember hearing it so many times. Any team can beat any team on any night in the NHL. And we've seen the Arizona Coyotes run through teams before, and Chicago Blackhawks this year beat teams, and they're supposed to be the bottom feeders. But if that team's showing up, chomping at the bit, and the other team's lackadaisical, you're going to have a tough night and often lose that one. And I can remember that series, and that's, in my mind, exactly what happened. And it's a tough one, especially against the Habs.
Yeah, all I heard was excuses following that series. All I hear is excuses every year. This team can't get the job done. At the end of the day, it's on the players, and that's all that matters. And yes, there's some severe scar tissue there, but this stems back to like the Paquin era of scar tissue. It's been a long time, man. Even dating back to the collapse in Boston, I still can't get over that. It's been like 12 years, but I digress. Let's talk top priorities, man. So the draft is coming up on Wednesday, night one, and then obviously day two on Thursday from Music City. In your feeling, your opinion, what's the top priority for Brad Treliving and company? Like, what do you want them to get done over the next 5 days here?
It's tough to say because the draft it's just so different than free agent frenzy. It's not really going to affect you tomorrow. You know, this guy's not moving to town necessarily and going to help your team out. And you got to think down the road, and you got to think long term, and you don't know where your team's necessarily going to be at that point in time. But obviously quality players. And in my mind, I would have had my scouting staff all year long getting to know these kids, because I think more than ever, like a Matthew Nyes, for example, the reason I'm so high on that kid is not necessarily what his on ice stuff is, even though that's very high. It's his mind and his mental capacity and his outlook and his maturity and his confidence and the way he speaks. And it's his character. So I would be having these scouts, you know, really sit down with these kids, take them out for a burger and just talk to them and just see how they act, see if they make eye contact, see how they treat other people, see how they talk to the staff, and just see what kind of what's this kid made out of. And I would want to surround my team with high character individuals. And I think this day and age with the youth and the way they're addicted to their phones and the way they don't like to talk personally, I think it's easier to see now than ever whether these kids have, you know, been developed as people and raised properly by their parents and blah, blah, blah. Are they the kind of person that I want to build my team around, that I want to have on my roster? And I would try to, you know, get high quality individuals so that you can, you know, go through that adversity and go through the rebuild or do whatever you need to do and have those people stick around, not shut down, not need to be babysitting, not need to be rolling your eyes saying, what's the problem with this guy now? You know, that's just such a cancer in a locker room.
That's a long way around discussing Matt Murray, man. They don't got to talk to any fucking kids because Toronto's got no draft picks, man. I'm sorry to curse because we know how people feel about cursing on this show, but nonetheless, they have no draft picks because your boy Kyle Dubas left them with nothing because he went all in. They got Boston's first, they got a fifth and a sixth. So my answer is simple. Find a way to rid yourself of the biggest mistake in Kyle Dubas's tenure, thinking it was a smart idea to bring in Matt Murray, who can't play more than 30 games in a season, to be your stud number one goaltender. And now Brad Treliving's got to clean up this fucking mess. So by far, buyout, trade, attach him to a rocket. I don't care. Matt Murray cannot be with the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Oh, I wonder what his injury is. Like, can you just LTIR him? It doesn't seem like he wants to play very bad. Why can't you just LTIR him? And that's the end of that story. Like, does he want it? Like, would he be down with that? You got to have a backroom conversation. Like, hey, dude, I don't know what's going on, but our doctors can sign off on your XYZ being completely hurt and you're done. We're your long-term IR. And he could go, thank you. Sounds good. I'll just lay on the training table for the rest of my contract.
Dude, how ironic would that be if they're like, they try to talk to Matt Murray, they're like, you're hurt. He's like, no, I'm not. I'm good to go. No, I'm not. Like, how ironic would it be? Like, no, he's like, I'm not doing it, man. I got to play.
Well, don't forget, he was playing well. Like, there was a point in time where we're going, hey, this has worked out. This gamble paid off, you know, and then he just got hurt near the end. And that was one of the risks, no doubt. But I don't mind him as a goaltender. When he's good, but he's just not durable, not even close. And if they can unload him again, like, I know I went off on the draft picks and the youth and what's coming up and all that, but I think
There's nothing
if
coming.
they can make some deals, make some trades, somehow figure something out. I mean, they don't have a lot of picks to deal with, but if you can finagle some things, maybe you can make some ads or make some deletes of things you don't want. Figure something out, even if it looks like you're losing. If you can get rid of some contracts that you don't want anymore that are hampering you from going out and doing bigger things, pull the trigger, because the time's now for the Leafs. We're going to go through a rebuild here in a short few years here, and you got to make hay while the sun shines.
Get creative. Bottom line, I think if you're
Yeah.
Brad Treliving, does he even need to be at the draft is my question, man. They got Boston's first, a late first, and a fifth, and a sixth, and maybe that changes. I don't know who they're going to trade to get draft picks, but it's a mess, man. And again, I understand why Kyle Dubas did it. At the time, I felt it was good that they made some of those moves, and I still feel that way. But he didn't leave this team with much in terms of trade value or capital or whatever you want to call it. Like, that's why I asked Darren Dreger the other day. Everybody wants a trade. What are they giving up to get Noah Hannafin or to get whoever? They have nobody in terms of picks.
I know, and everyone's just like, "Well, we need a top line winger."
But we can't trade the core four. Don't trade the core four.
Oh man, I would. I don't know, man. For what you could get for a Mitch Marner, man, like, he's so soft. He's not. I just don't see. I don't even know if he could pick up the Stanley Cup. I just don't think that he is going to be the guy that takes you to the promised land when you go through. See how battered and beat those Florida Panthers were at the end of the finals. I mean, that's what it takes. That's what it always takes. At the end of the Stanley Cup finals, you always hear the stories of what warriors these guys were to get there. There's only two teams. Everyone fell off for one reason or another. And I just fear that every single time Mitch Marner is going to fall off because he wasn't willing to go to war. I'm sorry. That's just that's his DNA. That's who he is. He's a fresh-faced, nice kid who just likes to do toe drags and rip it top kitty from the soft spots. It's like sick. He's sick at doing that. Absolutely disgusting at doing that. But he's not going to go to war for you. And I just cannot picture him hoisting that Stanley Cup up after being beaten, battered for 2 months. I don't see it.
It's funny you say that, because we have a mutual friend who won the Stanley Cup, we'll say, in the last 10 years. And we were talking, I think, at the beginning of the Florida Panthers series. And I said, what do you think? Like, they finally win a series. They got over that hump. He's like, man, I just see that team fully practicing the next day. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, there's no bumps and bruises. They're not banged up. He's like, I remember when we were in the Stanley Cup final in the playoffs, it was like you didn't know who was going to show up at practice the next day. For Toronto, everybody was at practice, saying that they weren't tough enough. They weren't playing hard enough. They weren't going to those areas to go long-term in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And it was really interesting to hear it from somebody who's been there before, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that is their knock. Think about the playoff games when you're watching and it's just they're just spinning their wheels and they just are on the outside and they just can't penetrate. They can't get that big chance. And it's just like, oh, and then it's just time is not your friend. 4 minutes, 2 minutes, last minute, like, do something. Oh, no one can quite get game over.
It's over.
I can't believe we fucking lost. Like, do something. Like, that's why I want those forwards. I want to add someone who can just get that puck deep and absolutely run their D-man, muck and battle and get it and push and shove and take a punch in the face and get it and dish it to the middle where so-and-so walks onto it and bang, that's your big playoff goal. No one does that. Nobody does that on this roster. I mean, we've added some guys that can, hopefully, but it's not enough. Your core four isn't even going to do that, not even close. And there's too much money, too much salary cap, too many studs taking up that core four to win without doing that. Like, you have to do that. It's not like my opinion. You have to do those things to win the Stanley Cup, and you need players that are willing to. And I mean, right now, keeping the core four, they're just going to have to change their mentality. And so far, I don't really see it. I don't think they really agree with that or understand it.
Sometimes I wonder why Brian Burke had such a boner for you. And then I hear you speak about this team and I'm like, oh, it makes a lot of sense. Anyways, the Betano wrap-up is presented by Betano.ca. The game starts now, 19 plus. Please play responsibly. Of course, recently named the 2023 EGR Brand of the Year. Had a couple people ask us about Connor Timmins. Where do you see Connor Timmins, Rosie, fitting in next season?
Timsy Bobimsy?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I don't know. He seemed to have flashes of being really good, and then was he put in the press box for a while, and it's yet to be seen. I think a guy like him, it's going to come down to training camp. Did you walk in there and did you not give them an option, but to put you in that top piece of I'm playing every night, I'm your guy. You got to go earn it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, I stand there too. Look, I think he'll get every shot to crack. Again, we'll see what they do over the next couple of weeks. The expectation is they're going to bolster that blue line. And I can't understand all these people off with Mark Giordano too. I think they just have to be more careful with the way they utilize and disperse Mark Giordano and have him fresher for the second half of the season. Easier said than done. I think he's going to be 40 when the season starts, but I still think there's some value in a guy like Mark Giordano. But Connor Timmins, I think best case scenario, he fights for a 6 spot, a 5 spot. Like, he was pretty good in that sample size with the Leafs last year. But again, different management, confidence at a different level entering another season. So he's an option. Like, that's as far as I'll go with him. A lot of conversation in the chat about who the Leafs should trade. We've had this talk a lot here in the offseason, Nylander, Marner. I'm still under the belief that anything is possible. Like, I know it's come out and, you know, they've been pretty firm in getting out to the media that we're not making a blockbuster move. I still don't buy that, man. I would not be shocked if it came across the wire and it's one of the big boys that goes. I don't know. I just had that feeling for some reason.
Yeah, well, this GM's not scared to make a big move and to pull a big trigger. So, I mean, it'll come down to the draft. It'll come down to free agent frenzy. If he's sitting there and he's having a coffee with another GM and he shows his hand of, hey, I need to get rid of this guy. And he's going, are you serious? Like, that's what I'm looking for. Like, what do you need for it? Well, and then all of a sudden they would be shocked. Holy shit, I can't believe we're putting together this deal. They works out. The GM wants something. He gets something. Boom, boom. A deal gets done. Pull a trigger. Big shockwave throughout the whole. It happens, and that's how it happens. And if that happens to this thing, I would be thrilled. I want to shake something up. I want a different identity here. I mean, it's been 2-3 years with this core. The same damn story every single time. And I think that I wouldn't be upset if they blew up the core 4 a little bit. Not, you don't have to explode it, but I mean, one guy moves out and you add a huge thing that they're missing. And, you know, maybe someone over there is missing someone like a Mitch Marner. We just need that high-end talent, high-end skill. We got the tenacity. We got the, you know, the core guys and the filler guys and the depth guys. We need this big stud guy to put the puck in the net all season long, get us into a good playoff position. Boom, you pull the trigger and make a huge deal. But, you know, if that doesn't come along, then there's no chance they're going to make a big splash.
My ideal trade partners for Toronto, just to wrap, the Carolina Hurricanes, the Seattle Kraken. I just think they make a lot of sense. Calgary as well. We'll leave on these two. Igor McJazz writes in, we need a Ryan Smith. And Mark Dagg writes in, figure out how to piss the core 4 off. All you got to do, keep them mad. Easier said than done, though, right? They don't get mad.
I don't know if these guys get mad. They don't try to shove it up your ass. I think they get mad and shut it down and pout with their lip hanging out is what I've seen so far. So I don't know. Yet to be seen, man. We'll see if they make a move.
Yep. So we'll leave it at that. Looking forward to the weekend. Looking forward to Monday's edition as well. Elliot Friedman's going to stop by from Music City, and we're going to get the very latest on what's happening with this Maple Leafs team. Again, expect a lot of noise next week with the draft and free agency. So looking forward to our final full week of live shows, Rosie.
Yeah, I hope he's greasing the wheels down there and he's got some good juice for us on the Maple Leafs. He's if anyone knows what's going on, it's that guy.
Someone make a trade is the way I will leave this show today. Many thanks to everybody in the chat. Producer Aaron, you're fantastic as per usual. That's Jay Rosehill. I'm Nick Alberga. Thanks so much for listening and watching, and we'll talk on Monday. Take care.